everyone. Thanks for joining our online Bible study today. Normally on Wednesdays at Life Church, when our youth are meeting, we usually meet together for Bible study. And recently we've been talking about a gospel-centered life. But what I wanted to do while we're in the current situation we're in is every Wednesday have a Bible study together online. It seems like a lot of people are doing a lot of stuff online these days when it comes to our communication. So, welcome, and I will let you know that we're joined by Frodo. This is my little buddy, Frodo. He hangs out with me pretty much all the time when I'm at home. So you may hear him in the background getting excited and hear, yeah, he's talking now. So you say hello? No? All right, just sit over there and be quiet. Sit over there. All right. So here's what I want to talk about today. Let me just tell you the current situation, and you're probably in the same situation that I'm in. Here I am working from home in my home office. Maria's at home. My oldest son, Jonathan, who's a teacher, he's not working today, so he's here at home. My second son, Joseph, who's a cadet in the U.S. Air Force Academy, they sent all them home. So he's here too, and of course James, who's 15, he's here as well, along with Frodo over here. So here we are, all together in the house, spend a lot of time together, which most of us would say is a good thing. We get to spend time together with family, but when you're not used to doing that for an extended period of time, it could probably create some conflict. And today I want to talk a little bit about conflict resolution. How can we go about resolving conflict that may arise in our life, in our relationships, or like most of us right now, we're all stuck at home and cabin fever, and there's probably conflict going to arise. Matter of fact, I've had to put this into practice myself a couple times. But what's the biblical way of resolving conflict? So what I want to do, if you have your study guides, Gospel Centered Life, this is actually the last chapter in our study together. If you want to pull that study guide up, you can use that as a reference, and we're going to be using some scriptures today as well. If you don't have access to that, if you just click the link below this video, it'll take you right to the process of getting the study guide, and you can use that with your family. But how do we resolve conflict in a biblical, gospel-centered manner? Well, I want to share a story with you from Galatians, because throughout Paul and Peter's journey and their ministry, there were times where there was conflict. And I want to read a story here and talk about it a little bit. But from Galatians chapter 2, we see Paul actually has a conversation with Peter, and it's a conflict. There's a conflict, and they're sharing with each other their side of the issue, and let's see how it goes. So Galatians chapter 2, we're going to begin in verse 11. It says, "But when Cephas," which is Peter, "came to Antioch, I opposed him." Now this is Paul talking, right? He's writing this letter to the church in Galatia. He says, "I opposed him to his face, because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he was eating with the Gentiles. But when they came to, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision party. And the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. But when I saw that their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter before them all, if you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you force the Gentiles to live like Jews?" This is what was happening in this particular situation. You had Peter, who was basically acting one way in front of one group of people and acting a different way at another group of people, and it was leading some of those astray. And so when Paul heard about it, he actually goes and he talks to Peter about it. And if you notice right there in the first part of the verse, it says, "I talked to him face to face." You see, through everything that was going on, Paul could have addressed this issue. He knew he couldn't ignore it, right? He couldn't withdraw from the situation. He didn't want to attack Peter. The stakes were too high. So basically what he did was he says, hey, instead of flying off the handle, I'm going to come to you in person and talk to you about, what's going on. In other words, what Peter and Paul's interaction with each other, right, was a good example of what we're talking about in a gospel-centered conflict. Great story. Read that one. But Paul approached Peter in public. He didn't gossip about Peter. He didn't try to bully Peter into changing his mind. He confronted him by going directly to him in person and having a great conversation. Matter of fact, he actually did it in front of other people. You see, Paul's motivation for all of this was not self-defense. He wasn't trying to defend himself. It wasn't even his self-interest. What Paul was doing was he was defending the gospel. So what I want to do is I want to share a couple of approaches to a gospel-centered approach to conflict. So here's a couple things you can consider. Number one, and this is in your study guide as well, but number one, right, is a heart. What is the foundation of your heart? What's the reasoning behind how you're going to approach this conflict, or even the conflict itself? You have to identify your tendency, right, toward either self-righteousness or insecurity. In other words, is it pride that's causing you to have a conversation with someone, there's conflict, or is it insecurity? Right? Do you tend to be on the defense, or do you want to blame others? Do you tend to harbor anger? Or gossip? So the first thing you do before going into resolution of conflict is really ask yourself the question, why? Why are you about to approach this situation? The second thing I want to point out is that you need to acknowledge what drives your attacking or withdrawing in any of those conflict resolution situations. Is it because you don't want to be looked at as being weak, or you want to be looked at as being overpowering or strong, or is there something you're hiding? Is there some kind of insecurity that may come out as you're trying to resolve an issue that you may have with someone else? And then the third thing is commitment. When you have conflict with someone, you have to commit in yourself to communicate with that person, because really you want to see a resolution. You want to identify the issue, have that conversation, right, for the purpose of bringing about a restored relationship. And as you engage with that person that there may be conflict with, talk honestly, have an honest conversation, be respectful. Be respectful about your thoughts, be respectful about your feelings. Invite the other person, when you're going to sit down and have that conversation, to do the same. Try to understand where they're coming from as well. And then finally, right, the goal. Talk about, when you sit down in the conversation, talk about, what you're trying to achieve. Talk about the issue, and talk about what it may cost if you don't resolve the conflict. Remember, anytime there's conflict and there's conflict resolution, Paul could have approached this situation in so many ways, but he did it with humility. He did it because of the heart and the gospel. In other words, what drove Paul to resolving conflict in this situation was the gospel. So if you're like me, you're probably going to be at a place in the next several weeks, if not already, where there's going to be opportunities for conflict resolution. When you do that, remember that your purpose is to bring people closer to Christ, to resolve any conflict by healing, maintaining, or even mending relationships that could be broken. And remember that God can get the glory in all of it. It's really about drawing others to Christ. And you may say, well, I'm a Christian. The person that I have a conflict with is a Christian. Well, we're reading about Paul and we're reading about Peter. These were two heroes in the New Testament. I mean, Peter was an apostle of Jesus Christ, disciple. Paul as well, but most of our New Testament was written by these two men, and yet they also had conflict with each other. So read that story and take your study guide, go through that, and here's the challenge. If there's conflict in a relationship that you have now, number one, pray, study God's word, ask God to give you wisdom, and go with humility for the sake of the gospel. Thanks for joining today. Next Wednesday, we'll have another one. We're going to start a whole new series next week. Not sure what it is yet, but I'm excited about it, and I'm glad you guys joined in today. Love you all. God bless you.